Different people that was featuring him back then when I was working there. They were like boys. Okay, Leo, I could tell it.
He's going to put you in the corner. You better turn around.
Mr. Span, about one more time, son.
I'm ready, let's go.
Neil, you tell me, Billy always stands back there and sort of points one way or another. So if I'm not in the right direction, you tell me which way to go. Preacher Carter ain't here.
He won't be here tonight.
Preacher Carter ain't.
Kevin is doing something other.
They're having revival in the church.
Janine needs to be there too.
Well, Janine is having revival in her church tonight.
Okay. Jerry, would you mind leading us in a word of prayer to open it up?
Father, we want to thank you for living in the country where we gather together tonight like this and celebrate our history. We thank you for the opportunity to have to worship you freely. And Father, we ask that you would help us to be mindful of those that have gone along before us, and have established what we are celebrating and enjoying today. Will you take this meeting and use it, and maybe something to be said tonight, and turn somebody's head towards you and the mind and heart. And Lord, we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Would y'all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now you can be seated there.
I went and got Kevin out of he was stuck in the swamp back there.
Was he back there?
Yeah.
Boy, I can
Now
best all in now.
Now say what you said about him a few minutes ago.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm all on your side, son. Okay. I can speed it back up now. Charlie Brewer, did you leave?
No, I'm over here.
Oh, okay, great, because I was going to depend on you to help me out, too. But I can forget you now. You ain't near as bad. Let me real quick, we need to run over some things, and I was hoping Ann would be here, but I don't see her. I don't guess we've had any major expenses since last month, but anyway, maybe she'll show up a little later.
Well, she probably took a vacation.
She's like, Janine, give a woman money, you ain't got a woman long. Janine, have you got our minutes?
Yes, sir. The meeting of the Alger-Sullivan Historical Society was held at the Leach House on August 17th. Jerry Fisher, our president, opened the meeting. Mr. Carlin led in prayer, and the pledge to our flag was given. Ann Brooks, our treasurer, gave the report. David Green made the motion to accept them as read. Lillian Green seconded. Jerry announced we will be open on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. The trustees will be in charge and will ask for volunteers to come and help. Jerry announced there is a change in officers. Janine Johnson will serve as secretary, and Jewel will be the hostess. Jerry announced we will have our Collectors Day this Saturday, August 21st. All are invited to bring their collections and plan for a good day of fellowship. Barney Jones will be in charge of the hot dogs, and Lloyd Barrow will help. Joel read the minutes of last month's meeting. David Green made the motion to accept, and Betty Jones seconded. Margaret reminded us of the sale items we still have. Janine reminded us of the birthday calendar. Jerry then introduced Mr. Don Holyfield. to give us a talk on the Civil War and the Indian Roundup. He gave an excellent presentation that was very interesting and informative. Everyone enjoyed his talk and asked several questions. Refreshments were served by Patsy and Lillian Green and IDS Chancellor. We had approximately 39 members and guests present.
Any corrections to the minutes? Margaret don't like us to vote on these, so they'll stand as they're read then, since nobody's got any corrections.
I make a motion there.
Ma'am?
I make a motion there approve.
No, you don't.
Not necessary. Okay.
Okay.
There are no corrections. They will stand approved as read.
Miss Lillian,
That's fine.
if they don't like what you done, me and you'll whoop them after the meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, so we got those minutes knocked out of the way there. Let me run over a few quick things here, now that we got Kevin back here. First of all, in the last month, we've had 3 of our members pass away. And they were Gene Bird. Y'all probably don't remember Gene, but Gene used to be real active, him and his wife. Many years ago, they came and they painted, brought people up from Pensacola to even work on our stuff. So we want to have a brick in honor of Gene. So while you're counting your money, and we're going to ask for a little donation from each person, if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, don't do it. We're also going to, Miss Louise McCutcheon. Henry Earl McCutcheon was a long-time Gulf Life insurance agent. He spent his whole life right here. His wife, Louise, she also taught school here at Century High School. And I don't know if you've ever been up around the park early in the morning, about 6 or 7 o'clock. You could always see 2 heads. They both were skinny as a rail, but they was up there every morning exercising. They walked around Showalter Park up that way for years. Henry Earl's walking alone now. So we're going to get a break for them. Instead of sending flowers, we pass the hat and try to raise enough money from that. Paul Lee's mother passed away this last month. I guess Paul, he runs that, isn't it B&J meat market out in Burnville. Paul must have given us probably 50 or 60 Boston butt roasts, and we never paid him a penny for it. He always donated them to us. Now, they're not a member of our association, I don't believe, but we do need to put a brick in memory of those 3. So, I would use my hat to pass it, but it's like my pocket.
Here's one right here.
Yeah, here we go, right here. So if y'all would, if you have any questions,
Will you take a chair?
food stamps, eggs.
Take siphon gas.
David, y'all just wait a minute. Okay. Okay. Y'all just pass it right on by you as you go. This is, if you're wondering about this brick is what out front, where it says James Houston Jones, we've got a number of our members. There's names out there, and it'll always stay there. And we're hoping that if you want one in memory of some of your friends or something, we charge $50 and we get the brick imprinted and everything with whatever you want on it. And it'll go right in out there, just like the rest of them. Anybody have a question about the bricks? You don't have to die to get a brick in your name out there. If you want to do it, just chunk her in there. And did y'all hear what Earl, Olin said a while ago? He's on my doggone hat. And all in it too.
10% charge for using that.
My goodness. I'm gonna lay this in here for now.
Gotta put something on it, 'cause we have to blow it off.
I'm gonna watch you. I ain't gonna let you get out of here. Bowling day.
Don't forget to wait for that.
Yeah, I got all that. Now, and in case you're wondering, sometimes it takes a few months before we get these bricks printed up, because we have to wait, or we try to wait until we have 6, 7, or 8 of them to do. It's not sensible to go up and ask him to do one brick. Once he gets set up, he likes to do at least 6. So I try to go by what he likes. Okay, let me knock on a couple of quick things here so you'll know what we're doing. One thing is we have applied for a grant to get that office building across the street over there, the old Alger-Sullivan building. It's the long one across there. Upstairs, it's got a big auditorium to it. We could have all kind of good things going on up there. Down below, we've got plenty of office space, and we got even, really, we could rent an apartment. And in the very back there, we have got a vault that's just about as big as this room here. We could use it for a jail. And if Miss Chantry don't straighten up, she'd be our first customer. But no, we may not get this. We don't know. Debbie Nichols is writing us a grant, and the trustees approved it for us to apply for it. It don't mean we're going to get it, but we're trying. I just wanted to tell you about it. Nothing we can do or nothing right now. Also, we're trying. I got a call about a couple of weeks ago about the old Century High School. They want to get rid of that building. The town of Century don't want it. They called and wanted to know if we want it. Now this will depend upon what the school board says. I talked to the trustees. The trustees says, let's go for it and see what happens. So we're trying to get, not the whole building. Now the football field and that gymnasium don't go with it. Just the building, and I'm assuming the property out front. But now, if somebody don't take it, it's going to be torn down probably. So, how are we going to take it? We don't know.
How
Yes.
old is the old school?
1936.
36, okay. Brick building or wood?
Yeah, well, it's brick, wood, it's an old building.
Okay, you are aware there's a lot of structural damage and a lot of mold in it from a steam pipe that came loose in that earthquake we had a while back. It was in really bad shape when Carbon Minister left it.
But we haven't gotten it yet, so before we accept it, we will have another meeting and we'll discuss what do we really want. But right now, we're the only outlet for it, as far as I know. It's going to be gone. Personally, I'd like to see at least the front of it saved. But that old library back there, that's a good part of the building.
Got out of the library,
And then the
science rooms.
the room on the other end, home economic room, that thing's in good shape too, they tell me.
No, it's not.
It's not.
My
Well-
son almost died the year he had to go to class in there. Was finally just said he's not going in that room. A lot of mold damage.
Okay, well, we don't know yet, so I mean, but I've told you what I know about it. Yes, sir.
You can get a grant for the building across the street. I've been in that, and that is, or you've been in it too, I'm sure. That's in excellent condition.
Well, I hope we
It's work
get.
on it, but that one you wouldn't have to worry about. You know, it depends what you want to do with it. But the structure itself, those floors are 2 inches thick.
Well, you can see right here, we got nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and we're paying out. It costs us $800 a month just to sit here. That's what we're doing right now. Okay, so y'all know all about that. Now let me bring you up to date on another little thing. Denver Moss is supposed to be here. He's the train man, the guy that's supposed to put the train back together. He's supposed to be here before the end of this month. He's going to spend 2 days out there measuring things. He says he's working on the train at his place up there because we give him a bunch of the stuff. So Denver is supposed to be here within this month for 2 days of measuring. So if you see him, now he's a strange guy, please don't go out there and talk to him because he's like me. He don't shut up. He stands still. He'll talk to you all day long. And there go our 2 days, nothing happened. So leave Denver alone. He's got long hair, but never mind. He ain't like me and Larry Jones. Not a slick top. You'll know Denver. He says it's going to be. If you don't, we don't know. We'll try. Okay, that is that. There's one other announcement. The chicken coop out back. Most of y'all don't even know where it's at. It's an old building. It's probably the last original portion of anything to do with Mr. and Ms. House. And so we have already ordered the wood shingles. Y'all call them something else. Shakes. Wood shingles to me, but anyway, it don't matter what you call them.
Where they were soldered.
Okay, so is that right? I didn't know that. But anyway, we have got them ordered, and we're going to repair that. We have permission to use the money out of the trust that we have set up for the rose garden out back. That's a $30,000 trust we've got set up, or not a trust, it's just money we've got to use for that. So we're going to pay for it out of that, unless we get lucky and this guy decides to donate this stuff, which we're hoping for. Yes, sir.
If I remember correctly, that was the flower house. Mr. House's flower house for the garden.
Yeah, gardener shed slash
Shed.
in garden.
That was a check she just gave me to get me to shut up. Thank you, Miss Heather. Okay, so we're going to be working on that. We'll probably take bids on it, and it's got some structural damage in there. We'll try to get all that fixed and hopefully be off and running. One other quick thing is that not this Saturday, but Saturday week. We're not going to be open that Saturday because we're going to the Peanut Festival in Jay. Now, I told y'all a while ago, we have $800 a month we have to pay out. Whether we make $800 or not, we got to do something. This is one of our good money makers. They don't charge us a dime to come over there. We go over there, we set up, we sell the books you need to be buying for your Christmas presents. And the toys for your poor little children. So they're in there. They'll cost you the same price in Jay. But not this Saturday, but Saturday week, about, Donald, 8 o'clock?
Yeah,
At 8 o'clock, we will be here. Now, if you can't go over there, please come by and help us get all this stuff loaded up. Because Margaret is tired of taking that stuff out of her van by herself. Donald and I help, we point.
You just said you put it by side.
But her back's getting down. But no, we need your help. We need you to go with us, and we need somebody to sit up that way and sell books, and talk, and drink coffee, eat corn, and smile and be happy. You'll have a
When
good...
we get back to unload,
That's right.
that's when we're all together.
Now, I think they close at 4 o'clock. 4 or 5.
Probably about 4.
Okay, so that means we'll be back here probably around 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So if you can't go and help us, you can't help load up, come on down here, open up, and get ready to help us unload the junk, the treasures.
What about y'all gonna go to Munson
We're gonna go to Munson. We're set up just about every weekend. We're going the very next week, I believe that's Munson. We're gonna go over there. Then the very next week we're going to Florence. I believe that is.
That's right.
Okay. And then the very next, we got something going on almost every weekend. We're obligated to take this stuff. Now, I'll be honest with you, over the years, there's only been about 4 or 5 people been going. We want to change that. We want all y'all together. And believe you me, if you don't go and do nothing but bring you a chair and sit down, you will enjoy it. It is a lot of fun. The only thing we don't have, what we had 2 years ago, is Nadine Hudson always went and bought us a whole pan of biscuits and jelly and coffee. Now we have to pay for our own. So y'all, come on and go with us. You'll have a good time. Bring your chair. Okay. No.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Janine's got something to say.
I just want to thank the people that were on the calendar fund, raising for our calendar. We have done an excellent job this year, and I cannot begin to tell you how much I appreciate all of your help and the time that you spent. And I know everyone worked hard because we've done well, and I really want to thank you for it. We still have monies coming in, we still have other things coming in, but as of date, we're in real good shape. So just want to thank the committee because they did a good job.
Okay. Does anybody have any question about anything that we've hit on? Yes, sir.
On the bricks, the 3 bricks for the individual health society, could it be worked out to where if there was not enough money collected to pay for all 3 bricks, that the society donated the difference and have it made up? We'll do that.
We'll do that. And it's one of the few times we ever ask anybody to donate anything. Your dues are $5 a year. I don't believe you could join anything. Janine even tried to get in reform school, and they want to charge her $5 to take her. I want to show y'all something. Is your money in a Escambia County bank?
No.
If it is, let me tell you something. They don't do much of a job of keeping up with things. I believe J.R. Jones told me this was in his daddy's drawer when his daddy died. It's a Escambia County Bank, Plumpton, Alabama. It's a 1951 Plumpton schedule. Century. It was in Plumpton, but it was the Century schedule. And then September the 24th, 1951, they played Walnut Hill, Tate, Jay, Catholic, Crestview, Milton, Niceville, Plumpton, Fort Walton Beach.
That was the year we beat Plumpton 51
Me and JR, we get a good laugh off of his daddy's things that he left in his desk. But this will go into our museum in there. Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want to bring out tonight? Remember, Christmas is coming. But you will go. Yes, ma'am, Miss Pat.
I want to say how much I like Mr. Tisdale's shirt. And I do thank you, sir, and all the other men that served in our military. We appreciate y'all.
Olin, I do wish we don't have a picture of you or you. Well, we got one of your brother, but we don't have one of you. Oh, I know, but I'd like to have just an individual in your uniform.
Well, I didn't look good in
Let me tell you.
blood on the mask.
Your wife said the only thing you ever done in there was peel potatoes, and you was in there. No, Olin was. Him and his brother both were real patriots. Okay. Anybody else? Anything else? Kevin, come on up here.
I brought some stuff, and I hoped I would get here early, but I was in court until an hour ago, so we'll see if we can, see if I can set stuff up under pressure.
They didn't keep you?
Did they release you?
Well,
Were you acquitted?
on a good report by a fellow citizen, I was able to escape the confines of the Escambia County Circuit Court. So.
If y'all don't know Kevin, you can, Kevin, you come over here. I don't think that camera will pick up on that side.
I don't want to break it.
Kevin, you read his article each week about the Civil War in the newspaper. And he does a real great job about that. And we're blessed in our organization. We have a lot of newspaper writers. And Kevin's also wrote 2 or 3 books. And I doubt he brought any with him. Did you?
I did not, because of my late escape from the courthouse.
But if you don't have one of his books, you need to get them all. And Kevin, I'm going to turn this over to you and let you tell all these good folks what you want to tell.
Okay.
We appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tom. It's always a pleasure to be here. Do we have a stand or anything we can put a projector on, or an outlet? I know usually we got the screens. So,
Yeah. Don's going to get it.
Okay. And I'll see what I can do about setting up.
No, you get your coffee.
Yeah.
I just bought this thing. It worked last time I used it, so I'll see how well it works tonight.
Where you want this?
Probably right here would be good, I think.
Screen right up over the piece.
We'll see how it works. We'll also see if I got enough support there.
Well, I got
Hold on the stand.
over here.
Oh, is it?
I'm really, we plug this in and you can just plug in.
They are high tech.
This was donated to us by Century Middle School.
That's awesome.
Harbor Century KM.
Oh, is it? Well, anytime you can get something like that.
Hey, Don? Don?
They know
That's right.
what it is.
That's absolutely right. We got a battery.
You got to stay about it now.
Yeah, well. That's right, easy. That's right, easy.
How did that go back to that wall traffic? Ransom, where that, the house up there, the Kingsfield.
No, it's not working.
Kevin, how much time do you need? Are you about ready? Are you need some more time?
Probably 5 minutes.
Should have backed it.
5 minutes? Okay, well, let's play a little game. Kevin needs about 5 minutes more. Let me tell y'all a quick story here about something I've learned this week. How many of y'all have seen, and I'm sure everybody has seen, the Mona Lisa? You've all seen copies of the print.
I've been to the museum and I didn't go into that room.
Okay? Okay, but do you know the story about it?
Yeah.
Do you? If you don't, you're fixing to know.
Maintain it himself.
No, he didn't paint himself. Let me tell you the story about the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa was painted of, let's see, what was his name? David
Leonardo da
Da Vinci. He painted that of his best friend's wife when she had her 3rd child. Now, she wore her hair sort of in a bun in the back. If you'll notice, Mona Lisa has the hair down here. And they didn't find this out until a few years ago when they x-rayed it, when it got stolen one time, that hair, he had changed the hairstyle. And he brought the hair down. And he repainted that picture over and over again, changing it along. He changed it so much, and he was going to give it to her for their having a 3rd child, that he worked on it so hard that he never even gave it to her. he always kept that painting the rest of his life, and it was never given to him. And he changed that hairstyle and all. And it's supposed to represent that smile that she ain't got on that face, just the way it looks.
Larry said he didn't believe that.
Who said that?
Larry.
Well, if I hadn't read it, I wouldn't have been here.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I learned from Mr. Neal that books will tell you a story.
Yeah.
See,
True.
they were paying attention.
Okay, how am I doing, Kevin?
Oh, pretty good.
Are you
I'm
ready?
Jerry? I'm almost there.
Jerry,
Okay.
If my technology
Lights.
will cooperate.
Okay. Well, Kevin, you tell me whenever you may throw for license.
I make no promises about this technology. I have learned as an attorney to have a fairly healthy skepticism about anything you have to plug into a wall.
Amen.
Actually, it did take being an attorney to figure that out, but all the same, it's proven to be true. Can everybody kind of see that?
You need a book to
can
say
you put it on? Can you put it up to the top?
It's a little crooked, but, you know.
Can you do it up? Can you make it go up to the top of the screen?
You on the book, Kevin?
Yeah, I think we got it. How's that?
Higher. Needs to be higher. We can, not bigger, higher.
Oh, well, how's that? That's tall.
Now, if you'll squat down,
Okay,
I'm just kidding.
you got it,
I
Kevin?
think so. I hope so. We'll soon know. If not,
mess it up.
All right, how about that? I bought this in Pensacola because I went to a criminal defense college over the summer, and they were real big on lawyers trying to incorporate technology in the courtroom and everything. So I thought, what better way to try it out and experiment on it than with history organizations and places I like to go and everything. And it's a pleasure to be here. I love to come over anytime I can, and I'm just honored that y'all would have me back and ask for me to be over here. I think that's a catchy title, at least I think so. And I tell you where it kind of comes from. History, to me, is kind of a lot of snapshots. You very seldom ever get like a complete picture of everything unless you read it in a book. And over the years, and Jerry, seeing you at the museum, you know, when I come by there and picking up little bits of tidbits and stuff like that, and then people mailing me stuff and reading stuff here and there, you kind of get some of those snapshots and you start putting them together. And stuff just kind of fell to me here and there, and I started learning that there's something that went on in this area during the Civil War that, well, a lot of us don't really know about, and no one's ever discussed it as one unit, one event. You always hear it mentioned here and there, but nobody ever brought it together. But there was really a civil war within a civil war that went on in this area during what we typically call the war between the states. Now, the reason for that is, see if I can go, here comes the big challenge. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, we did it. All right. The war in this area really started in earnest, I believe, based on a lot of stuff I've read, on October 9th, 1861. And what was going on at that time, you had the Union was holding Fort Pickens down in Pensacola, and the South held Fort McRae on the other side of the bay over there. Now, these two forts were never made to fight one another. These forts were made to defend against maybe the Spanish, the French, or the English, or some other yet unknown colonial power that might try to attack the U.S. coastline. So, coincidentally, the guns were arrayed where if they fired at each other in the channel, it would kind of be like two hands coming together. And theoretically, a ship would be going up the middle of that cannon fire, and it would eat it up. They didn't possess the range to reach each other's fort. And at the start of the war, the two sides opened up on one another. For what purpose, I don't know, except just a show of force or whatever. But they fired all the guns, and of course, nobody hit anybody. So on October 9th, the Confederates decided we really need that Fort Pickens, because if we had it, then we could prevent we could, further disrupt the Union blockade, and we could also use it to bring in supplies and all of that. So they landed 1,000 troops there, and they made a landing on Santa Rosa Island, and they overrun the camp of the 6th New York Zouaves. Now this guy is a Zouave, and he's kind of wearing these things that look like pajamas, I've always thought. And they were successful when they first landed. They overran their camp, caught them by surprise. These guys ran into Fort Pickens to escape, and the Confederates were doing fine until they stopped to pick up what these guys dropped. They started going through their personal things and raiding their camp and everything. And so when these guys got into Fort Pickens, they rallied the soldiers and let them know what was going on, and they came back out and they counterattacked the Confederates. Well, the Confederates fell back to a steamer that they had waiting offshore, and the steamer had a barge hooked to it, and in the haste of trying to get back on the steamer, on the barge became, the tow cable became entangled with the steamer, and the ship couldn't move, and the crew was frantically trying to break the cable loose and everything. Meanwhile, the Union was on shore firing into the Confederates on the barge, and they're just dropping them like flies. And the Confederates lost more troops on that barge than they actually did in the action on Santa Rosa Island. But eventually they got away, and they made it back to Fort Barrancas, which is where they stayed for about roughly 9 months to a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. And not a whole lot went on in this area at that time. In Pensacola, there wasn't a lot of major military activity, and this was considered the backwater of the war. If a officer that was career conscious was assigned to Pensacola, it was not a good thing because there was nothing going on here. He couldn't gain rank, and he couldn't gain the guts and glory that they thought was present in war. And the regular troops didn't like it either. There was one group of New York troops that when their ship rounded the bottom of Florida and they found out they were going to Pensacola, they mutinied. Because everyone thought it was just a yellow fever, malarial swamp area, and sometimes that happened because in that 1861 era, that was one of the driest years on record, and Fort Pickens has these cisterns that catch rainwater. Well, there was no rainwater to catch, so those men drank out of the brackish streams out there and caught cholera and dysentery, and they were just dying left and right. So it was not a very comfortable place to be. But around May of 1862, the Confederates had to make a very important choice. They knew they had to have the Mississippi River, and Vicksburg was already starting to be a focal point of a lot of activity. They also knew they wanted to hold New Orleans, because for obvious reasons, New Orleans is right there at the mouth of the Gulf and the mouth of the Mississippi. So they had to decide, do we defend Pensacola, or do we defend New Orleans and Vicksburg and all those areas west? General Bragg, who a lot of people would consider to be a lackluster general, made the decision, well, we got to defend the west. So what he did, he ordered Pensacola stripped. The Naval Hospital at that time had lead shingles on it. He ordered all the lead shingles taken off the Naval Hospital and shipped out. They pillaged Fort McRae and Fort Barrancas, took everything out that was usable, but left enough gunpowder and ordnance that they could stash it in the middle of the fort. And on a night in May 1862, at I believe it was a Green Lantern signal, when the soldiers left, there was only one or two of them, saw that Green Lantern, they threw a match in on those ordnances and tried to blow up Fort McRae and Fort Barrancas so it would not fall into the Union hands. Well, when this happened, the Union troops over on Fort Pickens, they heard a big explosion and they thought it was a trick. It was like 2 days before they ever went over there, because these guys were constantly playing tricks on each other and trying to one-up one another. One story goes that the Confederates sent a three-legged black dog over to Fort Pickens with a note on it that said, "We'll come pick up our dog when we get your fort," when we pick up our fort. Well, the Union adopted a dog as a mascot, called him Manassas, and that was his nickname. And the dog was a favorite around Fort Pickens and the Union encampment. And one day, a guard over there that was mad about having full sentry duty shot and killed the dog, and the dog died. Now the story is that that ghost dog roams Fort Pickens at night, and you can see him. I thought I saw him once, but it was a skunk. So they were always one-upping one another. So the Union thought, well, this must be another trick, So 2 days later, they come over and they find this fort's blown up and abandoned. But the Confederates also took law and order with them too, because Pensacola was a rough place at that point in time. The reason I say that is it was right on the edge of the Union and Confederate lines, so to speak. at this point, the war started getting kind of bad, and no, I don't want to renew. And and so the war started getting a little bit bad, so you had more Confederates deserting, and they would go to places like Pensacola because if they could get beyond Pensacola to Fort Pickens or wherever, then they started, the Union would give them shelter, because for every Confederate deserter they took in, that was one less Confederate soldier on the field fighting against them. So Pensacola, when the Confederates pulled out, was a fairly lawless place. When the Union rolled in and took control of Pensacola, the city council in Greenville and the mayor and everything pulled up and went to Greenville, and they set up a government in exile in Greenville, Alabama. And even today, a lot of families in Greenville can trace their ancestry back to Pensacola in that era. But that wasn't the only place they went. They also went to Pollard. They went to Sparta. They went to Evergreen. These refugees, Andalusia. They fled out of the Pensacola area because they didn't want to be under the Union control area. Plus, there was a lot of rough and tumble people that were filing into Pensacola, because a lot of these Confederate deserters were just robbers and criminals themselves, or they were running from the Confederate authorities. So around that time, when all this intrigue is starting to circulate in Pensacola, General Ashbutler, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, arrived to take command. Now, this guy actually links us to World War I, 70-something years in the future. Here's how that works. He was from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his family was on the losing end of a revolt against the Austrian-Hungarian emperor. And if you know your history, decades later, World War I started when there was assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand. I believe I got that right, in Sarajevo. So there was kind of a link there between the two. But when he arrived, he had that firm Austro-Hungarian discipline as a military man. Most often you see it in the Prussians. You see how they march, goose-stepping and all that kind of stuff, the Germans and all that. Well, they were kind of along the same line. But now this fella, he'd already been in Missouri, and he did such a poor job. He was so mean to his troops, and they didn't really like him, that he lost his commission. And so they were going to drum him out of service, but he had a connection in the political arena that got him to put him back in office, in command. But they said, let's just get rid of him. Let's send him down to Pensacola and let him hang out with those vagabonds and those crooks and those fellows down there, and then we don't have to worry about him. What trouble could he possibly cause, way out there in the middle of nowhere? But little do they know, this guy arrived with a plan. He got there and he saw all these ex-Confederates laying out under the trees around Fort McRae and Fort Barrancas, living the good life off of the Union allotment that they gave these guys every month to feed them and keep them, relatively fat so they didn't go fight and everything. So he said, hey, we need to do something with these guys. We need to get them together, organize them into a cavalry regiment, and because they know the land around here better than we do, and let's send them out on raids and everything. The Union officers hated it. They said, look, if the Confederates can't trust these guys, how can we trust them? We don't know who they are. A lot of them are cutthroats anyway. But he offered them a sign-up bonus of $300 per man, which was a lot of money in 1862 and 1861. And 120 men responded. And this is what Fort Barrancas looked like before that May 1862 withdrawal. Now, those guns, a lot of those probably ended up in New Orleans and Vicksburg and those kind of areas. But Ashford had to have some help, but he wasn't alone in his desire to put these guys together. There were actually collaborators in the Confederate government. In Alabama, there was this fellow, Alfred Holly, who was actually from Covington County, and he was a state legislator, and he voted against secession at the secession convention, and that made him very unpopular at the time in Covington County. So they threw him out of office, and he had a lot of political enemies in Covington County. Somehow he got on the bad end of a political deal, and they kind of tag-teamed him and got together against him and ran him out of office, and he lost the election partly because of his vote against secession, which was not popular in that area. And so he came back and he said, well, if I can't beat them, I'll join them. I'm going to start carrying he wanted a contract to carry the Confederate mail. And the way it would work, they'd take it down to Milton and they'd swap it out with a Union guy that would come up bringing a Union mail. So if you were in Pensacola, you could send a letter to your aunt or somebody up in Georgia, it would go to Milton. The Milton guy would meet up with the Confederate guy, and they'd swap bags, and theoretically that's how it would work. But after a while, Holly realized, him and his son, that we can smuggle stuff back and forth this way, and we can make money on the side smuggling, contraband and goods and everything. And then they figured out they could do it with horses. So they started stealing horses and selling them to the Union, and then sometimes they'd steal the same horse back and sell it to the Confederates. So there was, a lot of back and forth going on here. And he made a lot of contacts, him and his son. But he had another son who was off fighting in the Confederate military in the infantry and was a lieutenant, was an officer. He was serving with distinction on a lot of battlefields far off, but his daddy and his brother were doing a lot of what some would say was scandalous things in northwest Florida. Well, the war started going badly for the South, and in 1863, Holly got reelected because of anti-war sentiment. Well, we've seen that today. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan early on, and I'm not trying to get political, but early on it was, everybody was on board, and then as people started splitting off, then you started getting more anti-war candidates running and everything. It was no different anywhere else in history, and the same thing happened here. Holly regained that seat in 1863, but he kept the mail route, and he also started making money helping deserters get to Pensacola. And what he would do is, if someone showed up at his house who was a runaway Confederate, if he knew the code signs and knew what signals to give Holly, and Holly could recognize him, he would take his money and lead him to Pensacola through the back swamps and everything. And the signal was something like you had to stomp your foot and hit your pants and break a stick and throw it behind your back or something to that effect. But that's essentially what they were required to do. Well, he also began working with something called the Peace Society, and no one to this day really understands how the Peace Society worked, but it was an organization that was formed in the South, formed by Union infiltrators to try to build up anti-war dissent within the Confederacy. And they had a lot of secret symbols and a lot of stuff. They had rules that wouldn't write a lot of things down, so not a lot's known about them, but they did have a plan to get Southern soldiers to put down their arms on Christmas Eve, I think it was, 1863. Well, the only place that happened was right down here below us, around Gonzales, when a line of Confederate infantry walked off their posts that night. They were immediately arrested and taken to Pollard, where they were drummed out on the parade ground up there, and a lot of them were sentenced to death. But General Clanton commuted the death penalties given to them and gave them hard labor. And also, a lot of people don't know this, but General Clanton was court-martialed over this because a lot of people said he knew it was going to happen and he didn't do enough to stop it from happening in his ranks. But with all this going on, somehow the Confederate government got wind of what Holly was doing. So they sent a Colonel O.S. Holland to Andalusia to catch him. Well, somehow women's intuition kicked in, and Holly's wife knew that the informant they sent in to try to trick him into, giving the guy passage to Pensacola, she had a feeling about him that he was something was not right. So she told her husband, "You got to leave." So her husband and her son fled out the back door as a Confederate cavalry with O.S. Holland was coming in the front yard, basically. Well, Holly and his son escaped through the swamps and made it to Pensacola, where they hooked up with Ashbeth and these renegade Confederates. So now they're all forming up together. And the thing is, Ashbeth was not very discriminating in who he allowed into these regiments. There was a lot of outlaws that roamed the swamps, Okaloosa swamps, and all around this area during the time. Some of them were Jim Ward, Joe Sanders, Dick Curley, and A.B. Rhodes. Now this Dick Curley, Jerry, you gave me an article, I think, out of the Pensacola Journal that talked about this guy, and this was after the war, and the guy that talked about him, who was just a kid at the time, probably didn't know the Civil War side of this guy, what he did and everything. But Ashbeth was basically trying to divide the Southerners against each other in this area, and so by now he had it. He had his renegade Confederates and he had his outlaws, and now it was fixing to be not only Northerners against Southerners, but Southerners against Southerners. So, September of 1863, he organized the 1st Florida Confederate Cavalry, and attacked and burned the courthouse at Elba, Alabama. Jim Ward loved burning things down. If it could burn, he threw a match to it. And the story goes that after the war, he went around burning courthouses anywhere he could find them to keep the carpetbaggers and the Reconstruction government from being able to get the land titles to people that were, that had lost their property because of the high property taxes. I think he was just a pyromaniac. I think he just loved to see stuff burn, and that was a good excuse. But he burned the Elba courthouse, and him and those guys carted off anything they could take back to Pensacola. ASHS didn't like it, and a lot of the Union officers didn't like it either. But those men proved hard to control, and by March of 1864, a lot of them had taken the $300 and deserted a second time from the Second Army and fled off into the swamp.
Sure they weren't Iraqis.
Well, the thing was, they didn't treat them really good, because what happened is they gave them a very meager allotment of food after that $300 kind of ran out, and the officers were fed a lot better than they were down there, and so a lot of them left because things just got bad. But by September 1864, ASHS he said, look, we got to put some discipline with these guys, and they drilled them a lot harder, and they did a lot more work with them and got them a lot more organized. And in September 1864, they took this organization called the First Florida, and they headed towards Marianna, Florida. Now, they left on September the 18th in 1864, and they reached there September 27th, and that was all by horseback. They had a barge, a steamer that followed them out in the Gulf, and it met up with them somewhere around where Fort Walton is and resupplied them, but generally speaking, it was all by horseback. When they reached there, the Confederates already knew they were coming, because there was plenty of people in the area that said there's a large Union force headed east, and they're headed smack dab for the middle of Marianna. So the Confederates started rounding up men that were home on leave, wounded, furloughed men. Mostly what they got was old men and young boys. That's who ended up being the bulk of the defenders. Now, there was a regular Confederate Army unit around there, which was led by Colonel Montgomery. He showed up too. And around noon, the Federal forces charged the town, and this conglomeration of old men, young boys, sick soldiers, and regular Confederate cavalry and infantry were hiding behind tombstones in this cemetery in the center of town. And they just let loose on those invading Union troops and just wiped out the first wave. Hit them so hard that they made them retreat. Even General ASHS was wounded in the firing. Around that time, Montgomery found out that was not the only group coming. There was a second wave, and he decided that was more than his forces could stand. Ironically enough, the only ones that stayed to fight were the ones who lived there. The ones that lived in Marianna, who were in the home guard and whose homes and property were at risk, they stayed to fight because they didn't know anything else. That was home, and they were going to stay. But Montgomery and his men decided to leave, and as they were fleeing the town, they ran right into the second wave. So now you've got a huge battle going on in downtown Marianna, horses and men colliding in the middle of the streets and gunfire everywhere. And finally, Montgomery's troops managed to fight their way out, and that horrified and worn down group of men that were fighting around the cemetery, they lost their fight at the Episcopal Church, and the Union set the church and outbuildings on fire. One Union officer took the Bible out of the church, and that Bible is still over there. But they burned the church, and some sources say that the Confederates that surrendered and that they captured, they threw them in the burning church. And after that, they ended up going back to Pensacola because once again they had kind of got beaten up pretty good on another raid. Well, ASHS decided to try it again in December 1864, and he took the 1st Florida along with the 82nd, 86th, and that's supposed to be 92nd, I think, all black regiments, and the 2nd Maine. They ventured north from Pensacola towards Pollard. They had to capture, the Confederates were retreating, so they were destroying every bridge in their path as they retreated, and these Union troops were having to repair every bridge. Well, they managed to get to Pollard, and there wasn't a lot of Confederates there because they were off doing other things, and so they burned several warehouses, and the colonel that was in charge of them, Robinson, he got nervous because he was afraid the Confederates were going to catch up to them because they already knew they found out they were on their way. So that's General St. John Liddell, which moved a lot of cavalry in a short period of time to catch these guys. He didn't get to them in time to stop them from attacking Pollard, but what he did do was, and Judson Carden, a lot of y'all know him, he showed me this site, and he says this is the site where it happened. If you go right down 29, there's a fire department and where you turn to go to the prison on the right, and on the left, y'all probably know this better than I do, there is a road that goes to the left. I think it used to be a dirt road until recently. Yeah, it curves around back there, and there's replanted pine trees. Well, he showed me in those pine trees where there's an old roadbed. He called it Pensacola Pollard Road, and he said that was where those Union troops, the 1st Florida, the 82nd, 86th, and 92nd all black regiments, and the 2nd Maine, where they were sleeping. And they jumped these guys and ambushed them, and these forces started retreating. I guess they weren't really sleeping, but they were trying to make camp, and fought them all the way back to Pensacola. Well, there was another guy, which I didn't mention him in this slide, but in 1910 in Mississippi, he wrote a piece for a magazine, United Doors of the Confederacy magazine, that said that he was there for those battles, and he saw those Union troops trying to retreat across Mitchell's Creek, and he said it was the most perfect route he ever saw in the war. He said that the Union troops were throwing down their bags, throwing down their guns, and dropping everything they could to make it where they could cross that creek, and that the Confederates were on the other side shooting them as they came up the bank. And he said the Confederate troops were given the war whoop, which I guess was the rebel yell, and that they just really mangled those Union troops. And when the Union troops did get past them, the story goes is that they burned houses along their way back to Pensacola to light up the night and to punish the homesteaders that were in their path for what had happened to them. And that says when they got there. They got to Pollard at 5 a.m. December 16th, 1864. They destroyed a train trestle north of town, and the Yankees burned 700,000 pounds of corn, excuse me. And in the late afternoon, Colonel Robinson decided it was time to leave, and then I told y'all about Mitchell's Creek. A little while later, this would have been around March 1865, Sperling, who was a commander that came into this area, by now Ashworth is gone. He's worn out his welcome in Pensacola as well, and they packed him off somewhere else. Now you've got General Frederick Steele commanding in Pensacola, who was a scientific general. He believed war was a science just like anything else, scientific, and he believed in fighting a scientific war, according to Instructor Powell at Jeff Davis. He told me that years ago. Sperling, who was there, wanted to conduct a Sherman-style raid up into the interior of Alabama. Part of this was because the plan was, at one point, if Sherman's troops got cut off from their supply line, Sperling would come out of Pensacola and go up and link up with them somewhere around Columbus, Georgia, and lead them back to Pensacola or resupply them. Well, that never happened for Sherman. He fought his way on to Savannah with no problems. And so, but Sperling still wanted to do this raid. So he took Alfred Holly and the 1st Florida and some Maine troops and Illinois troops, and they come up into Alabama. They burned Andalusia, and they when they got to Covington County, Alfred Holly helped them find where all the political leaders were in the county. Remember, they had run him out of town at one point, and now it was payback time. And the story goes that there was one probate judge or circuit judge or something of course. He knocked on the door with a bunch of Union troops, and when the guy answered in his nightgown, he said, "Judge, you've had your day, now I'm going to have mine." And they loaded him on the back of a mule and rode him out of town into the darkness. And they took prisoners, they took young boys, and anybody that was of fighting age. They also took slaves and anything they could confiscate with them. And they left Covington County. They went up into Connecticut County and derailed the train. They derailed the train headed to Montgomery, and then they waited and derailed the train coming back from Montgomery and captured about 100 Confederate troops in the process, which those troops originally ended up coming through Canoe on their way further west. And that raid was actually a success for the 1st Florida. They did what they were supposed to do after that, and of course the war only lasted about another six weeks or so, and after that 1st Florida served garrison duty for 6 months around Pensacola and this part of of the state, or most of the tri-state area. And Alfred Holly, he stayed on in Pensacola because they didn't really like him too much in Andalusia right now. So he became a real estate speculator in Pensacola, made a lot of money there, but he also bought a lot of downtown Milton because, you know, Milton was a ghost town too. People fled out of that area, and he bought a lot of burned out buildings and lots in Milton and sold it after the war and made a ton of money. Now, the one story about him was when they knew that him and his son were involved in all this activity, they court-martialed his son, who was serving admirably in the Confederate Army. That son was cleared in the court-martial, but he was so irate over them questioning his loyalty to the Confederacy that he resigned his commission and enlisted in the 15th Confederate Cavalry as a private and fought out the rest of the war as an enlisted man to show, I suppose, that he was sincere in his beliefs. But after the war, he moved to Texas. He didn't stay in the area, and so someone asked me if the what is it, tax collector in Escambia County, Florida, if she might be some kin, and I have no clue. But I thought it was an interesting suggestion. But Holly made a lot of money, and a lot of these first Florida guys, they just wandered on. The outlaws that were in that bunch, they went back to being outlaws. And there's plenty of stories, like I was saying about the story I got from Jerry about after the war, how these guys carried on their activities in the swamps, and you know, some of them I'm sure you could have. There was a tavern at Bluff Springs that R.W. Brooks would write about sometimes in the stories. I'm sure that some of these guys were probably in that tavern drunk and telling war tales about how they burned Elba 10 or so years after all this happened. So I think that's fascinating myself. But anybody have any questions or comments? I'm glad the technology worked.
Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea if that's the community Holly in Santa Rosa County was named after him?
I wondered that. I really don't know for sure whether it is or not. He was in Covington County. He was his name was not very highly regarded because of this. But what he did do after the war, see, he still owned a lot of land and money, but he accumulated some before the war. He donated money to build churches, to build land to build churches on, and some schools. And he didn't really forget. He still had a kind of a benevolent attitude towards Covington County, but I don't think they ever forgave him over there for his wartime activities and everything.
Any relation to the Hollies and Bruce?
I don't know. It's really, I've seen some genealogy on him at one point, and it talked about his family staying in Pensacola, and I think he died in the late 19-teens, and perhaps, and his wife died sometime around the same period. And I think their descendants, his son's descendants, would still probably be in this area to some degree. So there may be a connection. But the son that was in the war, that was court-martialed, he went on to Texas, and the trail goes cold after that. There's no other genealogical information that I could find on what happened to that son in Texas. But somewhere over there's probably a whole family of Hollies. Don't know how they got over there, or why they.
Or they might got shot on the way.
That's right. They may have not made it. So.
No, probably good. Community of Holly, there are these slaves probably named after him.
It could be. It could be. But you know what I liked about this, it took me about 2 or 3 years to gather this information, and I didn't intend on gathering it. It's just bits and pieces of stuff kind of fell to me, and I got to reading about, in a lot of notes about how there was actually another war that went on. It was a war within a war, and very little was written about it. Because they would say that you could ride up on a homestead in this area during the war, and it was not uncommon to see, a husband and a wife hung in a tree out there, because if they were felt to be pro-Southern and it was the first Florida, they might pilfer the farm and do that to the landowners, and if they were felt to be pro-Northerners, and the Home Guard was looking for deserters and they thought they were hiding them, they might do the same thing to them. So,
Or if they just had too much money.
So, which is probably a lot of that buried around somewhere, related to that. So any other questions or anything?
Kevin, you were talking about Mitchell Creek at Mike Davis, and so I just wondered if that was where the Bible was, or
understand it, when they jumped those Union troops that were on that Dawson Road, around that area, the Union troops started retreating towards Pensacola, and it was like a fighting retreat all the way back. This fellow, I think his name was Deckworth. I may be wrong about that, but he was the one that wrote in that magazine, and he talked about they followed them all the way down, and it was a relatively organized retreat until they got to Mitchell's Creek. And what I assume happened, I don't know this, but this is just a guess, the Confederates by that time may have been able to send another column or so behind them, and were waiting for them on the other side of the creek. So I'm just thinking this, but if you put yourself in the mind of the commander, you know this is going on, and you know they got to be going to Pensacola. The reasonable thing to do would be, well, I'm going to divide my forces, and I'm going to send some of them south and get in behind them, and when they cross that creek, then I've got them between a body of water and my position, and I'll open up on them. So.
Ms. Green, that curve there at Bluff Springs, across from where you've got your monument display, all out in those woods on the other side of the road, were recovered a lot of Burnside rifle cartridges from that skirmish, and Burnsides is what they were carrying in '64.
So that had to be the spot. So, I'd like to see that sometime. I feel an article coming on.
We had some fellows who came up from Fort Walton Beach, and we took them down there, and they were all out in those trees. I guess they're planting pines now.
Fascinating. Well, I hope I didn't bore y'all too much. I hope y'all have me back again.
Since you're from over around that, boy, you probably enjoy. Have you got that one?
I don't, I will enjoy reading it. I have to fight Jeff Ross off from it, though, see if he'll be trying to take it away from me.
Okay. Was there anything else we need this to do? I don't guess so. So I think.
In the social leader here, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do, but we do need to welcome our guests and sing birthday to somebody.
Oh, that's right. Margaret turned 39 again this month. And if I remember right, ain't it your birthday this month too? Or close by? November the 8th is hers. Mark, where you at?
Not sure.
Okay, so you're 39 again?
It's the big 8.
All right, come on, let's go for it.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mother. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Knock on the door. Okay, let's get some refreshments.
Let us get this unhooked, right?
Oh, okay.
I could be a lawsuit.
Is this freeway closed?
No, I know. Yep. Shot out. Yeah, that mom. The reason I bought the small one, I want to get something out of the car. I'll be back. What's your mask do, Ed? Ed, what's your mask?
Well, did you get enough?
Well, thank you. One day I was at the deal and every guy I was in, and it took me like 25 minutes to get out. Let me tell you, I did not care.
Just 1 minute.
I want to tell you, there on Dawson Road, which was the Confederate camp. Now, I get the two
Okay, good. Now you go get you something. He seems to be doing pretty good. How old is he? Well, he's well behaved.
They were associated.
I know it's past his bedtime or close to it. He seems to be doing very well.
Judson told me, I thought I understood him say, of course, he never showed me where local
There you go. Right. You'll know tonight.
Thank you. I thought I understood him.
There you go.
The Battle of Bluff Springs in 65
Oh, yes.
started basically, head start.
Oh, yeah.
But their camp was back there in the nice one.
Well, that's what Judson told me. That's what said. Along that old road, they found a lot of bullets and stuff like that. He said it felt like they were really against it. But now, the Battle of Bluff Springs was about 4 or 5 months later after that raid in March. Yeah. So it would have been just a few months after.
It was dropped.
No, unfortunately not. I don't think I've ever seen that. I mean, I've been told, one lady was telling me, there used to be bullets that were left in the trees.
They had their so we had the troops up on the top of the hill. Well, I thought I would just walk along the fire. I have the whole thing. Especially for an odd thing.
Would that have been during the March fight or the March? Yeah.
And the 65.
Every now and then.
Well, it's different outfits.
Yeah, because, you know,
I think it was Massachusetts. I don't know if it's Massachusetts. The guns were allotted to Massachusetts, and they got grabbed.
so,
That gun was a serial killer back to its
but you know, by that time, have you ever read up on that first floor of the
That's pear cake.
Yeah,
But there's a really good article on Key River
That's
Traitors.
what started. That's actually what started it. That guy mailed me a copy of that. And, you know, the article was interesting. The footnotes just blew me away.
Oh, he really did a lot.
There's a Florida outfit that there's a book about. It's one of the reprints of it.
Gary,
Yeah, I can't wait.
I'm working on that. It's a matter of priorities. I want to get CC Andrews, reprinted, and several others.
Yeah, Andrews, the guy that wrote the campaign. Yeah, I've got a copy of it. I borrowed.
This one,
Yeah, it needs to be.
And there's another one.
Oh, good.
There's another book. It's actually better for the history of the war in Florida, but it don't
That's
it's called the Mobile Campaign.
Wonder why I admitted that.
I'll put it up. They considered it wasn't important.
Well, you know, the thing is, there's just so much that's not written about this area during this time. It's just hard to. I'd like to know if I could day-by-day account of what went on.
Well, this raid in Florida was actually a better account, so what I thought I might do. Probably easier for them. And a lot of some people thought about
You go back. I'm gonna take that boy home with me. I got a grandboy about that age.
There you go. All right.
I gotta get that.
Yeah, he's sick.
Rankest picture.
No, he's fine.
What's he? I said that might have been taken around 42. I'm sure. That's the only two photos that I know about. I'll see you ago, Grandpa.
I see him every day. I don't know if I had. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is that so?
Oh, okay. I'd love to see it. I think we're almost
Go out there.
Can't go down there, pay her down,
Yeah.
right down under the hill.
Yeah, really, he does.
That's spring.
Nice, good.
I didn't get it down there, but Cotton Creek, where all the fellas from Camp Dickey used to go down there. He told me she was a big eater. And then on the hill, he used to go down there, he got all kind of video on. He found everything around Taylor Spring, whatever camp.
Oh, I hate Atlanta.
The whole bunch of
Chris,
That one was a rough one.
Yeah, everybody loves Christ. And that eternal invisible. I'm eating new numbers every day. Yeah. Long holiday. Other than that,
I hope it's just all right.
What am I missing?
not exactly. Has some flavor to it.
Put all that on. Are you enjoying your new
I got a granddaughter.
Yeah, we love it out there.
She's got a magnet.
Great. You go around, truck new road out on the right hand side.
I ain't got no friend. You got it.
Hello, guys.
I ain't got no on my hand right now.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We got lots of each other.
Right there in the house, right there. Oh, you ain't done food trade.
Yeah, we sure did. Wasn't us.
That's right.
But it's our home. But that generator, we got right inside.
Exhaust came out.
Let's see.
This is what place on fire. This is the main
Over here so I can.
ball game. We had a track meet and a ball game and then
We just have,
we had 4 grandkids.
basically one more,
Side,
skirting on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're about to have